All right, let's continue some discussions now on some of our top stories. Erin Bates, she is a writer at the Daily Maverick and a freelance journalist. She joins me in studio now. We'll talk about some of our top stories, the latest revelations at the state capture inquiry, as well as the death of Gavin Watson, what all of this means for the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. Erin, hi, nice to see you. Great, okay. More startling revelations at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. The name of Ace Magashule once again coming up. And basically, Mxolisi Dukwana labelling him as a blesser. And all of these new revelations into another project in the Free State, coming on the backdrop as we marked, the first year since this inquiry started sitting.
Certainly, and a lot of that information is in this book, which you'll actually see some of the legal counsel and evidence leaders holding, covered in tabs, all those different coloured plastic tabs, because the asbestos heist, as Dukwana describes it, is so finely detailed in Daily Maverick's book on Gangster State. And we've heard Dukwana describe effectively a fiefdom in the Free State. Of course, these are allegations. Of course, they are untested at this point. But as you've rightly said, Ace Magashule, now Secretary General in Lutuli House, an incredibly powerful office in the governing party, was Free State Premier at the time that much of this went down.
I want to talk about, some of Dukwana's testimony. We've heard in some of the evidence that's already been given at the Commission about threats that were being made. Dukwana also talks about threats that were made to him via the media. I mean, what does this point to? He says that Magashule had also threatened to sue him through the media. I mean, what does all of this say? Does this paint a picture of the extent of corruption that we saw happening in this particular instance in the Free State?
Well, certainly if we look back to the Vrede Dairy Project evidence, some of those intended beneficiaries who of course never benefited, and in fact one of them, a Mr. Dlamini, said that all the project brought was misery with it. They spoke about the climate of fear in the Free State, and that's why I use the word fiefdom. It seems as though from a lot of the evidence before the Commission that this is a province that is run on fear, it's run on intimidation, it's run on leveraging power and connections in the police service and in the judiciary. And yes, we heard yesterday from Dukwana him saying that he'd been threatened by Ace Magashule in an interview after his first evidence in April. He then told his lawyers to write to Magashule at Lutuli House and say, we are the lawyers for Dukwana if and when you want to take legal action. To this day, Dukwana says there's been no such communication, but Magashule's PA did say they'd received the letter. So that threat of litigation that has really gone nowhere. I think, Griselda, what it does do is point to the stakes here. The stakes are incredibly high. This book and some of Dukwana's evidence touches on the alleged assassination of an alleged bag man for Magashule, a businessman who was involved in this fraudulent asbestos project in the Free State. And the point of it was to get rid of roofs on houses built before 1994 that were poisonous, that had asbestos in them. To this day, those roofs haven't been replaced, and the people of the Free State have been shortchanged by a project that was earmarked for 225 million rand. That's a whack load of money. Where did it go?
Emails this time. Emails coming from the office, seemingly coming from the office of Ace Magashule, his personal assistant, and lots of communication about monies that were meant to be paid by certain individuals, to certain individuals. Just looking back, I know previously was it Dukwana's testimony in April. I mean, now we're seeing emails, a sort of paper trail about what's believed to have happened.
Certainly, and that paper trail is enormous. I mean, we know the Commission has hundreds, if not thousands, of boxes of documents. What's so critical about those papers is where they may lead us to in terms of the chain of evidence, having an intact chain of evidence here, because a lot of this is allegation at this point. And when it comes to Dukwana, he also spoke about a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet contains a plan for payments of monies paid to a company, or two companies in fact, who were involved in this asbestos project. Why is that critical? Because that spreadsheet includes initials, so first and second letters, a simple two-letter reference, but in some cases it's AM, which Dukwana alleges references Ace Magashule, 10 million rand intended to be paid to him.
Yeah.
There are a number of other names. There are also the names of 2 companies.
Yeah.
And the allegation is that spreadsheet shows you where the money was intended to go. Obviously, it doesn't show you the money was paid, but there are other documents that show financial bank records with monies going out, around 9 million rand. I think it was in late 2014, early 2015. And there you start to see the finer details that link this chain of evidence.
Sure. Erin, just before we run out of time, I want to get to the issue of Gavin Watson. We saw the chair of the commission say today that he had actually signed a directive for Mr. Watson to furnish an affidavit to the commission in light, of course, of what we heard regarding Bosasa. I mean, he's certainly left with a lot of questions about what exactly happened. How much of a damper does this put on, as would be a key witness? How much has his death put a damper on what more we could have heard about what happened at Bosasa?
Well, of course, with Gavin Watson's death, we've lost a critical witness on Bosasa. Angelo Agrizzi is clearly an aggrieved former right-hand man to Gavin Watson. And as gripping as his testimony has been, and that of some of the other Bosasa employees, it's one version. We will never know Gavin Watson's version. He infamously didn't sign things. He infamously didn't put his name on paper when he could avoid it. In one case, a document bearing his signature was pulped up, put into a plastic bag with some water, and then flushed down the toilet. So with Gavin Watson, he takes to the grave not only his version, but potentially the names of people involved in political party funding, the intricacies of Bosasa's alleged corruption involving correctional services officials, and the finer details of how he ran his business. But I think what's important there, Griselda, and if we can just quickly, I know we're wrapping up, touch on 2 things, both in relation to Dukwana and Magashule and Agrizzi and Watson, and that is the counterpoints. Gavin Watson we know as this nemesis, as this great fiend who was running a racket, really, with Bosasa. But he was also a member of a family that in the Eastern Cape was profoundly involved in the struggle, that had a very strong identity as outspoken ANC supporters, and that's something he carried through the rest of his life. He was also deeply religious. We know that Agrizzi said Bosasa was like a cult, but Gavin Watson led prayer meetings and considered his faith incredibly important. So that's the counterpoint there. And then quickly on to Magashule, what Dukwana also said was a lot about Magashule's early days in the ANC in the Free State, the 1990s, how he was almost like a Father Christmas. Yes, a blesser too, and that has very sort of specific connotations, blesser, rather than Father Christmas, but someone who would hand out clothing, who would be generous to the people of the Free State when he saw them suffering. And it almost sounded to me like a Robin Hood. But the irony, of course, is that you're a Robin Hood politician, but you're also part of a democratic state and trying to lead a province and then allegedly laundering its own money.
Erin Bates, who is a freelance journalist and writer at the Daily Maverick, joining us there.